Young Turks now has audio, the TYT Audio Network, podcasts of some of your favorite shows and new shows, including one with Nina Turner, former Ohio State Senator. She's going to do We the People with Nina Turner, talking about equality and justice and seeing that through the eyes of regular Americans who are affected by politics and policy. Everybody check it out at tyt.com/audio.
Donald Trump is off overseas at the G7, and our allies are doing what they can to diffuse this brewing trade war that he's gotten us into. Just to be clear, when I say our allies, I mean most of our allies, not his allies, since he doesn't seem to like most of them very much. In advance of the G7, he tweeted this: looking forward to straightening out unfair trade deals with the G7 countries. If it doesn't happen, we come out even better.
How does that work?
If that's the case, then why are you doing it, you nincompoop? But that's what he's going to say, of course. And he goes there and he punches Macron in the face and he punches Merkel in the face and all of that. There are people there, though, that he does like, or people he'd like to be there. So why don't we turn to one of his first requests at the G7, which you'll see here.
We have a world to run. And in the G7, which used to be the G8, they threw Russia out. They should let Russia come back in, because we should have Russia at the negotiating table.
Some might argue that they're already well represented there, but look, he would like to make it the G8 once again. I would like to just fill out the history of this if you're not familiar with how the numbers got moved around. Russia joined the group in the 1990s after emerging from the wreckage of the Soviet Union, making it the G8. But its armed intervention in neighboring Ukraine in 2014 and seizure of the Crimean Peninsula angered other major powers. The remaining members, led by President Barack Obama, expelled it in a sign of global resolve not to let international borders be redrawn by force. Mr. Trump offered no specific reasoning for why Russia should be let back in, even though it retains control of Crimea and has not adhered to an international agreement to end its intervention in eastern Ukraine. So there's more to what he's doing at the G7, but his first big request is to expand its roster slightly.
So I just wanted to add a little bit more context, and this is actually news that we talked about on yesterday's show. So Putin was recently addressing the people of Russia, and he also was essentially addressing other countries internationally for being allies of the United States. And so he essentially poked fun or taunted US allies for doing business with the United States and said something along the lines of, what did I tell you? You do business with the United States, what are you gonna get? You get these tariffs, which he likened to sanctions. So he's been criticizing the United States pretty aggressively, and to me, what it does is it messages that Trump is the perfect candidate, or the perfect president, I should say, for someone like Putin, who really wants to dominate the world stage and wants to kind of get the upper hand over the United States, right?
It's pretty easy to get the upper hand over Donald Trump.
Exactly right. And now we have Trump saying, like, Russia should be at the table. I don't know why he adds an R at the end of Russia. But anyway.
What's interesting is that, well, first of all, we have imposed sanctions. We are currently in a policy of sanctions by his own administration, by his own Treasury Secretary, who announced this back in April. We have expanded our sanctions against Russia. So he didn't get that memo. Okay, if you didn't read it, whatever. I just want to go back to the fact that he was concerned about deals with the G7 countries, because that implies to me that he did not realize that we are technically one of the 7 countries in the G7. Mm-hmm. That's just a math thing, but there's actually a G6 if he's being accurate about the countries with which he is invoking trade wars, which is all of them.
That's right.
The ministers of finance, the treasury secretaries and so forth from the G7 met before this meeting. This is the leaders. Before that, the financial leaders met, and 6 out of 7 of them, the 7th being us, basically were opposed to all of the trade wars that Trump has started, that they have retaliated against, and that will continue to spiral upward. Every single one of them declared in some manner that it feels like the G6 plus 1.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I want to talk more about the odd relationship between us and our allies versus Trump and those who are not our natural allies. But John McCain actually put out a statement about this announcement that Trump put out, and it talks a little bit about that. So I want to read an excerpt from his press release. John McCain said, Vladimir Putin chose to make Russia unworthy of membership in the G8 by invading Ukraine and annexing Crimea. Nothing he has done since then has changed that most obvious fact. Every day, Russian-led separatist forces are killing Ukrainians in the Donbass. Every day, Putin's forces are helping the Assad regime slaughter the Syrian people. And every day, through assassination, cyber attacks, and malign influence, Russia is assaulting democratic institutions all over the world. The president has inexplicably shown our adversaries the deference and esteem that should be reserved for our closest allies. Those nations that share our values and have sacrificed alongside us for decades are being treated with contempt. And it is interesting, really fast. It's interesting that like in his talks with Trudeau recently, or Macron, or Merkel, who he doesn't seem to have liked even as much as he liked them, like these people who are natural allies, naturally he goes after and he attacks. The people who are authoritarian leaders around the world, as Bernie Sanders pointed out recently, he just feels this natural kinship for. And you might say, well, they're flattering him. But the thing is, as Anna pointed out, I mean, Russia was recently sort of taunting Trump over his trade problems with his allies. And that leads to him wanting them to join the G7 to make it the G8. But when he just had a contentious talk with Macron over trade, he got pissed at him. When he talked with Trudeau and he didn't like the criticism, he got pissed at him. So why is it that with our allies, when they criticism, he reacts negatively, but when it's authoritarian rulers, he's fine with it?
Maybe he just has some sort of affection for them, but I think that there might be more at play. And also considering the fact that he's in the middle of this investigation, which he can't stop himself from tweeting about, it's probably not a great idea. As Emma said during the break, it's not a good idea for you to out of nowhere mention that Russia should be involved, in this group of allies, that it should be the G8 again. It's kind of insane.
Yeah, he doesn't really have the mental block to know, wait, they're in the news cycle, they're talking about how I'm in Putin's back pocket. Maybe I shouldn't out of nowhere, unprompted, with no policy position behind it, say that Russia should be back into the G8, make it the G8 again. But just a side note about John McCain, I wish that he would hold the United States to the same standard that he holds other countries to. He's not making the same argument that the United States should be expelled from the G7 because we are currently helping the Saudi blockade in Yemen, et cetera. So I just want to take John McCain's comments with a grain of salt, because often it's just ramping us up towards more war, more aggression, et cetera. And he often doesn't have policy behind it. He likes to criticize Donald Trump in public and then vote for him in private. So
it's just back to the G8 and the whole Russia versus the G6, the rest of our allies. I mean, to your question, maybe the fact is that we actually have trade agreements with all of these nations, in addition to being part of the full G7 bloc. Yeah. We actually have sanctions against Russia.
That's right.
So it's a very bizarre sort of anti-Machiavellian. It's very strange.
And also, I mean, if he had a reason, if he could actually point to how this would benefit the American people, then okay. But these, the way that we're treating our allies and the tariffs on aluminum and steel are actually going to negatively impact employers, more importantly, employees and consumers in the United States. So I don't understand why he's doing this with, again, our longest serving allies. It just doesn't make any sense at all.
Yeah. Even if you're not remotely interested in the Russia angle of this, and you think that countries that invade and seize territory should be allowed in with no conditions on them, remember that we're talking about him going there, punching our allies in the face, and we are going to lose hundreds of thousands, if not potentially millions of jobs as a result of it.
What is it a good idea to get involved in a trade war with Europe? What president would think that, except for Trump?
Yeah. Right, well, the last time that happened, we had a Great Depression throughout the world. The last time we had an isolationist policy was in the 1920s, in the wake of World War I, and that ultimately unleashed a global depression and World War II.
I'm sure
so
Trump
that's
knows
what
that.
happened.
Yeah.
Okay,
I'm sure
he studied that. He studied that.
He's a well-versed historian, the best historian.
And he can count.
2 easy ways to follow the Young Turks. One is hit the subscribe button down below, then you're a TYT subscriber. And second is ring the bell. And when you do that on YouTube, you're notified of our videos.